To all right, well, Tanse, welcome to Candu's Links to Learning this afternoon. I'm super excited. I trust that you are all here. You're here on purpose. You're ready to take in the good knowledge that's going to be passed on to us from our guest speaker, Thomas Benjoe. He is the CEO and founder of FHQ Developments. And if you were to take a brief look at, his resume or his summary of what he's been involved in, this guy has a lot beneath his belt. Like he's got lots going on. So we're really excited to have you here, Thomas, and to present and to pass on all the knowledge and the passion I'm sure that you have. So my name's Michelle. I'm really honored to be here. I'm living in Amisquitchee, Waskahigan, Treaty 6 territory, Edmonton. My roots are really in Saskatchewan, though. All my family still lives back there. So when I hear about Saskatchewan and places like Saskatoon and Moose Jaw and Regina, it feels like home to me. So welcome. We just want to give a shout out to Creator for the gift of another day. An opportunity to walk in a good way, to walk in good relations with, each other. We can be in good relation here virtually, walk in good relationship with the land, the waters, the animals, the plants, all that's around us. So we just give thanks for this opportunity in this moment to be alive, to be here, to be breathing. So thank you, Creator, for the gift of another day. So today's workshop, super excited. It is creating economic impact through Indigenous-led business model. So as I said, our guest speaker is Thomas Benjoe. I believe you're in Saskatchewan too, Thomas? So the webinar today is, as Indigenous people, we often find ourselves in a place when we are trying to meet the objectives in business while balancing our commitment to growing a community with us. Profits versus livelihood or environment is often what is at stake. So at FHQ Developments, we have spent a great deal of time considering our traditional values and vision of who we are and where we see ourselves in the future, and use those values to direct how we invest, partner, and build relationships that focus on wealth generation, sustainability, and livelihood. The evolution of Indigenous business is not just to participate in the economy, but to meet our expectations as Indigenous communities and ensure that we are creating an economic path of sustainability that is designed by us. So we hold those keys. And it's those teachings, those good values that have been passed on to us from generation to generation that also help to guide that way. All right, so a little bit about Thomas. So again, he is the president and CEO for FHQ Developments. His background includes Indigenous business, governance, and economic development, as well as commercial banking. So there's a couple of highlights. There's a whole list of what this guy is involved in, what he's accomplished. But I would like to just highlight that he was recently featured in the Globe and Mail's report on Business Magazine as a top 50 change maker in Canada. How amazing is that? Served as the 2019-2020 United Way Community Champion, the recipient of the Crowning Achievement Young Alumni Award from the University of Regina, recognized by CBC's Future 40 in 2013, and the Red Cross Young Humanitarian of the Year in 2009, and a top performer convention winner, which recognizes the top 1% of RBC employees in 2015. Like, remarkable, amazing accomplishments. So we're really excited to have you here, Thomas. So there will be an opportunity for questions and answers and comments at the end. But if you have any questions or comments along the way, feel free to use that chat box. I will definitely make note of them, and then we will come back to them. There will be an evaluation link. This is my favorite part to say. There will be an evaluation link sent to you at the end of today's workshop. When you fill that out, you your name will be entered to win a prize. Who doesn't love prizes? And so there's two $100 Visa gift cards up for grabs, and that will be chosen on Friday, and then the winners will be notified. So really, like, first of all, your voice is really important. We'd love to hear your feedback. But your name will be entered to win a prize, yo. So fill out those evaluations. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so you're not here to hear me speak. You're here to listen to Thomas and what he has to bring to this conversation. And so we're so delighted that you're here with us. And so I'm just going to pass the virtual mic to you, Thomas. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Definitely a lot of things going on in our world, and I just wanted to take the time to share a bit about what we're doing as an organization and how we're trying to really change the landscape in terms of how we look at Indigenous business. But I think, before I get into the presentation, one thing that really we should acknowledge is that as Indigenous people, we have a different definition when it comes to creating wealth, and that's what our organization is about, right? It's creating wealth for our communities. When we look at the Western definition of creating wealth, we think about the individual, we think about, me, myself, and what I'm trying to do for me and my family. But when we start to think about, well, what's important from an Indigenous perspective or an Indigenous lens, Indigenous wealth is focused on the community. So we don't create success unless our community is coming with us. And so those are some of the very foundational aspects of what we do as Indigenous individuals and how we try to uplift the community with us. So just going to go to share screen here. Great. Let's see here. All right, so we're going to focus on creating economic impact through the business model that we've developed as an organization. And this has taken a great many years for us to come to this point, and we're always evolving and redrafting our strategy as an organization to make sure that it absolutely makes sense for us and for our communities that are part of our development corporation. So this is the vision of the organization. So our nations exercise their inherent rights and sovereignty through financial independence. So what the heck does that mean? I know a lot of marketers say that's too wordy, but it absolutely speaks to who we are as an organization. So when we think back to the sovereignty of our nations, our nations can't fully participate and advance their sovereignty unless they have financial independence, unless they have financial resources to help them pay for the things that they need in the community. We know that our economy is based on a dollar economy, so we need to be able to generate dollars in order for us to pay for the things that we need in our community. And where we came to as an organization around this vision has been, we've seen nations in the past challenge government, and with the threat of government saying, well, we just won't fund you anymore. We're gonna hold back your funding. And we're not really sovereign nations if we don't have our own financial resources to say no. And we've seen nations do that in the past, where they did tell federal government no on a number of situations in our history, and they were able to advance their sovereignty that much more because they had that ability. Now, not all of our communities have that, but that's what we're working towards as an organization, is to be able to give our communities that opportunity to be there. And that it has to be understood as well that we don't just distribute cash out to the community. It's about creating sustainability first, which means we have to be absolutely patient with how we manage those investments. So if we look at FHQ Developments as an organization, we were established back in 2010. Our mission, we contribute to the long-term economic independence and prosperity of our limited partners and our citizens by developing profitable business ventures, economic development opportunities, and advancing employment and livelihood. And this is for our nations and the citizens within, our communities. And what's really unique to our tribal council is we do have 5 tribal groups, which is Neheo or Cree, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and Anishinaabe or Saulteaux. So we have to respect the processes and acknowledge the different teachings that we learn from some of our life speakers from our community, which has been a part of some of the foundation of this organization. Now, how we do this, we've actually created 3 separate divisions, which makes us a little bit more unique as a development corporation. So we're not just focused on investments. We have these other 2 responsibilities that we said is absolutely important to us as an organization. So investments and partnerships focuses on wealth generation, creating new businesses. Economic development is how we as an organization bring our communities along with us. So how are we teaching the nations within our tribal council? And how are we teaching the citizens within our tribal council about entrepreneurship and building an Indigenous business ecosystem? The third piece is Indigenous HR solutions. So not just putting people to work, but helping to actually build careers. So we spend a lot more time with employers and we spend a lot more time with Indigenous talent to make sure that there's a stronger fit, so that retention of those individuals is stronger within those organizations. And as well, we actually started to provide HR consulting for our communities where we saw a gap that, our communities typically only get a limited amount of resources to have an HR professional in the community. So we've figured out other ways to be able to provide those resources that could benefit our communities and the talent we have working within our communities as well. So 16,000 citizens are represented through the development corporation's communities. So our history as an organization, what are we trying to accomplish? So there's 3 things. There's Indigenous wealth, there's sustainability, and there's livelihood. And like I said, this requires a lot of patience and acknowledgement of the decisions that we're going to make as an organization. And the investment is not just about buying a company. Investment is about spending the extra dollars for people to be trained and to build capacity within our companies to be leaders. So that's an investment as well. And then there's also, investment in our community, and more specifically, we like to focus on youth led initiatives. In our history, when we first started off as an organization, we actually spent a great deal of time, and we still do even today, but looking for best business practices that other nations, other tribes have utilized, more specifically around the nation building processes that were developed through the Harvard business model. We've taken a lot of that back in 2008, 2009, 2010. That was the sort of go-to information that we had at our fingertips that was absolutely beneficial, because it took the tribal business models in the US and spoke to how they created success for their communities. So some of the critical pieces to this is good governance. So making sure that we properly structured the organization. We are a limited partnership with 12 limited partners, which is the 11 communities plus the tribal council, and the general partner, which is us. FHQ Developments Limited is the general partner. And in this particular case, we structured the board of directors to have a bit more independence. So we do have a number of professionals that serve on our board, and we still have a mixture of community leadership. So we have a representative from our Fowl Hills communities, and we have representative from our Qu'Appelle communities. And of course, our tribal chief is the chair of our organization. And so what that has done in terms of good governance is it's brought balance. We have to acknowledge the importance of, you know, what it means to be a successful business and business operator, business manager, but we also have to acknowledge the importance of community. We have to test those models with what we know from our communities, or the feedback we get from our communities, or the perspective from our leadership. So it's mashing the two together. And, you know, we found that it has created a lot better balance in how we make decisions and how we choose to do things strategically as an organization. Business cases, we're constantly looking at business cases everywhere. We take the time to learn, and not just Indigenous as it relates to North America, it's looking across the globe. What are other nations doing, Indigenous communities doing in other countries around the world? What are some of the best and brightest companies in the world doing as it relates to, you know, ESG investment, and, you know, taking a lot of those business cases and bringing it inside of our organization is very critical. The third piece that was important for us when we were creating the development corporation was consultation with our communities. So that's ensuring that we had feedback from our youth, from our leadership, from our life speakers, from our technicians, making sure that we got that feedback to understand what it is that we needed to do as an organization to be successful. And of course, planning. We are always, it feels like we're always consistently focused on strategic planning and changing our focus and strategy on a regular basis. So we're never staying still. We're always moving forward and always developing what our strategies are as an organization. These are, of course, some of our values that we focus on as an organization, that, you know, helps to align where we see ourselves with the rest of the world, and where our partners or our staff absolutely have to align themselves to these values. But more importantly, it's the piece on our guiding principles and teachings. If there was one thing out of the values that is, you know, absolutely universal, it would be a focus on always doing things in a good way. So making sure that even in the most difficult situations or difficult negotiations, we're still doing things for the good of our community. And when we look at the guiding principles and teachings that we have, you know, we look at, you know, making a living, we look at living together on the land, and you look at, you know, if you're to look at our media and marketing that we have, you know, we're always focused on creating partnerships in the community. And that's not just for business, it's for building relationships with organizations that we think have good alignment to where we're trying to go as an organization. So we try to make sure that we deepen those relationships, but also that we formalize so that we're absolutely clear on the objectives of what we're trying to do, and that we're trying to move everything forward. And, you know, this is where it's a lot of fun, because then we have a lot of non-Indigenous organizations that do end up partnering with us, and we're not only helping them build an understanding of Indigenous engagement, but they're also sharing with us some of the tools and resources and experience that they have to strengthen what some of our strategies may be. And so it makes it easier to live together on the land. When we think about some of the teachings around setting into place arrangements for livelihood, living, and evolving treaty rights, a lot of the things that we do as an organization, we do spend a lot of time advocating. I know it seems a little strange for a development corporation to do things like that, but it's important for us to build the ecosystem around us, build the economy around us, to acknowledge that we exist and to acknowledge that we have tools and resources and values that we should start to consider as an organization, or as a province, or as a nation of Canada. We need to acknowledge how important Indigenous values are in that system. And I think the more that we do that, we start to shift our focus on what's important. I had a conversation this morning. I'm the chair of the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. I had a meeting this morning with our other chairs and CEOs of the other chambers across the province. And one of the things I shared with them is, the measurement of success. What do we think of today when we say, well, how do we measure success in our economy? What do we go to? The typical thing is GDP, right? GDP measures transportation, it measures trade, it measures all of these things as it relates to business and growing capital. What's actually measured in that process that is a negative to GDP is the investment in education, investment in health. And when you think about those things, and if that's a negative of how we're measuring the success of our community, is that a good measurement for us to have, right? When we think about the success of our communities, we're reinvesting in people. We're reinvesting in our Indigenous talent that we have. And in order for us to be successful, well, we need healthier people, right? So we think about community differently. We think about those measurements of growth in our community differently. So we have to, we really have to make sure our voices are heard when we start to look at these things. And, just because we said GDP was a way of measuring economic success doesn't mean it's the right tool. We need to challenge the systems that are in place to say that there are better things that we need to measure. Some of the things that I like to focus on is around Indigenous engagement and the advocacy work, and just thinking about where our business has come to even be able to exist. We have to use Indigenous engagement for us to get our foot in the door, to begin activating and participating in different businesses. But we also have to think about, well, what are those policies? And I had a good discussion about this morning as well around policy. Having good policy, helps to move the needle. Having great policy helps us to really advance our communities. And sometimes when we look at the policies that have been created, we a lot of them have been just focused on, well, how do we just get Indigenous people to participate, right? What do they measure? They look at ownership. What is the ownership percentage? And then they look at Indigenous labor. How many Indigenous people have we created? Well, good policy gets participation happening, but it doesn't deepen the effects, and people can sometimes thwart the policy. So what do we have? We have, if you look at the business community now, in terms of Indigenous businesses, and it's changing, it's evolving, but a lot of organizations, and this is in our history as well, before I became CEO, we had a number of partnerships with organizations that only wanted to use us for name. They said, hey, you're FHQ Developments, we want to partner with you. And we want to go after these contracts over here. And we said, okay, we need cash. We're a new company. We got to generate cash flow to be sustainable. Okay, let's be partners. But what I began to notice, when coming in through as being a new CEO, I didn't find that was effective enough. Yes, it meant that we had some new cash at the end of the day, but it wasn't moving the needle. It wasn't moving us forward, and it was definitely not sustainable because those JVs are related to single projects or specific territorial locations. And it wasn't focused on all of the other things that are important to us when it comes to the livelihood of our community, the reinvestment in our community. It doesn't help us with all of that. So, we had to go back and reassess. How are we going to look at these relationships going forward? What does a true partnership look like from an Indigenous lens? And when it comes to Indigenous ownership, it's not just about being a 51% owner. It's about being a 51% owner in a legal structure that actually gives us power, that actually gives us the power to make decisions and the power to manage the strategy of those companies going forward. And there should also be tools in there to measure that success between the Indigenous organization and the non-Indigenous partner or capacity partner. And so, we've built those structures inside of our company. So that's, Indigenous ownership as it relates to participation. The JV relationships now transforming into more specific partnership agreements or limited partnership agreements that hold each other to more account. And it's not just holding to account the non-Indigenous capacity partner, it's holding ourselves accountable as well. We have the responsibility to teach our partners how to do business in an Indigenous context and with our value system. When we look at the labor side of things, it's checking a box. How many people did we hire on this particular contract? We hired 20 Indigenous people, check the box. When you look at the underlying data of that, and we were guilty of this because we had government contracts that said, check the box, put people to work. So we put people to work, and but that wasn't deepening our capacity. That was just checking a box and saying somebody participated. We moved away from that model and said, okay, we need our own HR model. We're going to redevelop this. We're going to take control. And we're going to do it in a way that we know will build better retention strategies and will give greater benefit to our citizens, not only from our communities, but from other communities outside of our tribal council. And so Indigenous labor shouldn't be just measured on checking a box to participate. We should be measuring it actually based on, well, what is the salary? What is the long-term salary of that individual going to be? And are they beyond frontline? Are they, becoming managers? Are they executive? All of those things create even greater impact in our community. So if you think about it, if you step back and say, my uncle was a laborer on this job versus my uncle was an executive working on this job, we know the salary that an executive would make versus a frontline person. But we think of the impact to livelihood that is created through that. And through both, they both create impact in our communities. But I know even from my perspective with my family, I'm expected to help and to share amongst my family members and give opportunity to them as well. And I could do that at a greater, create greater economic impact through that, through my salary versus somebody on the front line, which, they're still doing that as well, but the impact is greater. So we need to see when we are measuring, if we are going to measure Indigenous labor, it has to be based on the salaries that those individuals are taking home. And it also ensures that those companies are digging deeper to put those Indigenous individuals into higher capacity positions. So it's just holding to more account. So we say Indigenous participation versus now when we're doing this advocacy work, we're saying Indigenous participation plus value plus impact. Let's create more value in our community. So, we think about the organizations that are constantly evolving their Indigenous engagement strategies or procurement strategies. If they're making that type of an investment in their organization, it's important for us to really measure outcomes. So are we just going to check the box and say how many people have participated? Or are we going to look at things differently and say, well, what impact did those decisions that we made in policy create in the community? And so you measure the livelihood impact, you measure the business's reinvestment impact that happens. And if you look at Indigenous communities versus non-Indigenous, we don't go anywhere. We don't take our wealth and put it somewhere else in the world. Our wealth stays in our community. And the more that it stays in our community, the more it stays in our local economy. And so a dollar earned for an Indigenous organization will circle the economy more than a non-Indigenous business who may take their benefits from an opportunity and they may invest it in a company in the US, they may put it in a portfolio and it's being invested around the world. They have a global portfolio, but you see that cash that's leaving where we typically keep that at home and we continue to reinvest in our own local economies when we are trading and creating commerce amongst ourselves or our local economies. So this is, when we think about the evolution of Indigenous engagement, you got to think of with these companies, you got to ask why. Why do we even have Indigenous engagement? As an organization and as part of our strategy as well, we partnered with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, who actually created the first Indigenous engagement charter that helps to provide resources and tools and best business practices to non-Indigenous organizations to deepen the relationships and grow their engagement strategies. So in Saskatchewan, what I like to say is there shouldn't be any excuse for any company to not have an Indigenous engagement plan. There's resources there that are free, and there's individuals there that are able to help you. So when we think about, well, why Indigenous engagement, and I think, we're all privy to the news over the past few weeks on, Every Child Matters and residential schools and the unmarked graves. And I'm sure you've all faced questions from somebody in the community saying, well, what can I do? How can I help? And we can't go back and fix what has happened in the past. We have to think about the future. We have to think about, well, what do our youth actually need? They need to feel a part of the community. And how do we do that? Well, we create better engagement. We teach people. We get them to acknowledge and understand. And I think we're at an ample time in our history to be able to do that, to be able to actually teach. And people are going to listen. And we're able to build more allies that can help us fully build an understanding of what it means to have Indigenous engagement in our communities and in their own lives. So I think we have an ample opportunity at our fingertips right now. So what are we trying to accomplish? And these are the questions that I ask companies all the time. What are you trying to accomplish when you're creating Indigenous engagement? Are you trying to increase the amount of Indigenous employment? Are you looking to increase a spend? Or are you looking deeper? what can your organization do that can create a greater influence in the community? There's so many different strategies. And I think, one of the things that was actually an interesting learning from developing our engagement charter was that not every community can develop the exact same strategy. Every organization is unique. Every organization has a specific or finite amount of resources to be able to implement their strategy. And what we like to say is, as long as you're making the effort, we're not telling small town business with 2 staff to, create this grandiose Indigenous engagement strategy. Do the little things that you have the resources for. Train your 2 staff that you have around Indigenous awareness. Find an Indigenous supplier that can supply your business. Or maybe there are employment opportunities. I don't know. There's so many different things that you can do, or maybe you're very passionate about a certain type of area of education. Create a scholarship with an Indigenous organization. So there's little things like that, and everyone can do something. But when I think about what it is we're actually trying to do when we create these engagement strategies, it's about capacity building. We often talk about giving someone a fish and teaching them how to fish. Capacity building is about teaching us how to fish and allowing us to be able to move up or move vertically in organizations quicker. I think of some of the team members that I have in my organization, and when they work for certain organizations, they hit the glass ceiling. And no matter what they did, no matter how much education they went and received, they were not able to advance in their careers. They come here and they work for us, and they're able to be themselves and be able to push the limits and push new strategies and develop themselves and build new capacity. That has to happen in other organizations as well. So capacity building is very, very important. Sustainability, and this is not just as it relates to environment is absolutely critical. And we look at issues of like UNDRIP, right? We had a number of organizations. How many seen it in the news? I mean, people saying, oh, we're giving veto to Indigenous communities to agree to our resource businesses, and they're going to stop all of this progress. It's not that we're here to stop progress. We very much care about progress because it means more opportunity for our community members to learn and develop and create livelihood for themselves. But it's about acknowledging the balance that we must have with our environment, with Earth, right? There needs to be balance. We need to think about things differently. If we are going to do something, are we doing it in a way that is sustainable enough that it's not going to affect our kids 30, 40, 50 years down the road, and they're going to have to pay for those decisions? Are we doing things that are sustainable so that they can continue building on that sustainability into the future? That is what we are saying as Indigenous people, is let's look at this through another lens. Let's make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's when it comes to how we move resource projects forward. So sustainability is about more than just an environment. And when we think about sustainability of our businesses, in our history as a tribal council and as the businesses that were created before the Dev Corp was created, we have a history of non-success. We've built successful companies and they failed because we weren't focused on the sustainability of those businesses. We took the cash out, or we only focused on trying to fulfill the social inequities that we have in our communities. And we did it at the detriment of our businesses versus being patient and allowing those businesses to grow sustainably before we took our cash out to use in the communities. And that's always the balance our communities face, is we need more financial resources to pay for the things that are knocking on our door, for the issues that we're dealing in our community. But it takes a lot of patience to make sure that there's good balance between those two things. So sustainability is critical. The third piece here is impact. We really need to figure out how, as organizations, how do we demonstrate impact? How do we, as Indigenous companies, how are we creating impact? And not to do it at the detriment of your business, but do little things. Focus on different things that you can create strategically in your organization that is still sustainable, but is creating more impact. And so we really need to focus in on those things that will benefit our community into the long term. And when we think about those organizations that do deploy Indigenous engagement strategies, when they know that there's greater impact in the policies that they're creating, well, they're gonna feel good about that. They'll perhaps make further changes to increase that type of investment in the community to continue to create an even greater impact. So when we look at the FHQ Developments model and what we've built as an organization, this has taken us about 4 years of developing this strategy. And when I look at the success we're having in business now, we are just at the start off point, and we're already seeing very early success of our companies, growing at very, very fast paces, but also creating opportunity or greater livelihood opportunity within our community. And so the three areas that we focus on is ownership and governance. We focus on the capacity development, and we focus on reinvestment. And we try to teach organizations to change their policies to better recognize these types of structures, so that they can then focus on companies that are focused on greater impact. So from an ownership and governance perspective, you need to look at the ownership structure. Make sure that the Indigenous organization, look at what type of controls they have in place. They may not be the majority, 51% or more, but they may still control the board. They may still control other aspects of the business. And, more and more we're shifting from partnerships. And I could see that in our evolution as a company, where I spent a great deal of time talking about partnerships, but now companies are actually coming to us and saying, well, how do we give FHQ Developments equity? How do we give up a portion of our business so that the Indigenous organization can own us directly, rather than creating a whole other entity? Now that's real evolution. I think we're seeing that right across Canada. And if you look at some of the major acquisitions, you look to Member 2 on the East Coast, taking a very significant play in owning a company that does the majority of fishing on the East Coast. That is a major play for us. So let's celebrate those types of things. But the ownership structure is very, very important, because now I bet those companies, inside of their value system, inside of the strategies that they're going to deploy, there's probably going to be greater impact that they're going to create in their own communities than the company had before. And it's not just Indigenous communities that are benefiting, it's non-Indigenous communities and economies that are benefiting from that relationship as well. So what's been negotiated? This is, as an organization, we went from, let's partner with everyone and get cash, become sustainable, to, okay, we know what we need to focus on. We need to exit those relationships, focus on what's going to actually create real sustainable opportunities for us. And yeah, we're going to go through some growing pains, but let's focus on that because it's going to mean greater opportunity in the future. And when I look at the partnerships that we've created, it typically I'd have a non-Indigenous organization meet with us, and then we'll go through the process of building a relationship, and then they'll slide their partnership agreement over to us, and we kindly push that back and say, that's great, here's ours. We don't follow our partners arrangements. We typically ensure that we feel comfortable with the negotiated legal agreements first before we move forward. So it's us doing the pushback and making sure that they know that we are in charge when it comes to the creation of the new company, and that we're here to learn together and build a company together. Other things we look at: ownership percentage, whatever that may be. And I know more and more nations are actually partnering together to acquire a company, which is awesome. You look at the governance structure. Do we control the board? Do we control the policy and decision-making strategy? Are we able to hold to account? I look at our legal agreements. We actually have it in black and white in a specific section in our limited partnership agreement that our partners absolutely have to meet in black and white. And our customers, I know we've been challenged a few times when our customers come to us and say, well, are you just saying this, or is this actually happening? And I could just point out to our legal agreement and say, there it is. We absolutely have to meet those objectives. Otherwise we're in breach of our partnership. So it's there. And you also have to think about who are the beneficiaries. So when we think about what we do, I mean, it's 16,000 citizens that will benefit from the success of our organization. And when we partner with other tribal councils or other development corporations on other business matters, it amplifies even more the amount of beneficiaries that benefit from that relationship. We also think about the impact on territory, and even when we do business in another community's territory, we still try to recognize and try to create benefit for that community as well. So we have contracts in different parts of Saskatchewan. I have my HR team there building relationships and making sure that we hire Indigenous individuals from those communities so that they can benefit and share in the expanse of livelihood within our companies. The capacity development, so hiring, supporting, and retaining Indigenous talent. That's making sure that we're providing quality opportunities, not just quantity. Quality is so important because then people get to really create a greater impact, right? You think of yourselves and the benefits that you receive when you have full-time employment. You're buying a new vehicle, you're buying a home, you're helping family members in your community. There's so many different things that benefit once livelihood is really established. We think about the training aspects in our organization. So how do we get individuals through their journeyman processes, or how are we, even from a student perspective, how are our business students, how are we challenging them and training them and giving them all this extra opportunity so that they can become leaders in the community? And that's part of growing Indigenous leadership. It's how do we ensure that the capacity and development goals inside of our organization are actually advancing forward and people are moving vertically in their careers. We look at board experience. How are we giving community members opportunities on our boards once the companies are fully established, we'll look at bringing in other Indigenous community members to sit on those boards and bring their experience to help grow those companies. And we always think about the future workforce. So, it seems a bit silly for us to invest in, doing STEM programs and saying, hey, that's our future when, it's not an immediate or something that's going to happen in 5 years. Yeah, it's going to take a few years, but if we're making those investments now, building the brand and reputation with those Indigenous youth, well, hopefully they see themselves in our organization at some point in time in the future, and that we can help shape that future for them. So it's very, very critical that we be a part of that process of investing in our youth. So reinvestment in community, in wealth, and in entrepreneurs and nation businesses. So reinvestment in community, a lot of that is focused on youth. And so we try to leverage relationships and try to do more for youth in our community. We look at things like Indigenous women in the trades, where that is a growing demand. And I can't believe the amount of Indigenous women that we have been able to support even through our scholarship, where people told us that, well, we can't find Indigenous women to bid on these particular jobs. Well, there's a lot of up and comers coming, and we're excited about being a part of that process. And there's no scholarships there for them, actually, and that's why we chose to find a gap in the community and support it. But that's going to help in our future growth, because hopefully they see themselves working for us in our organization and becoming leaders in our organization. Reinvestment in wealth. So this is how we view wealth going back into not just our limited partners, but within our businesses. So when we are very successful in business, there's a dividend distribution that happens from that business. It comes to the development corporation. We take those dollars and we actually reinvest in more companies. So we're trying to grow the portfolio quickly to diversify the types of businesses that we're in, while trying to benefit in these other areas like employment and livelihood. And so that creates some sustainability. We don't just give away everything that we have. We strategically continue to place it in more and more companies just to diversify. And even inside of our companies now, typically, at the end of the year, you see profit, and you want to take that out and spend it. Well, we don't do that as well. We're very particular on how much cash we keep in our companies to help with further growth. So you need working capital. You have to say and restrain yourself from the needs of the organization and put that back into the companies to continue with growth. Reinvestment in entrepreneurs and nation businesses. So this is how, through our economic development function, we're trying to share those best business practices. We're trying to get a better acknowledgement of who and what capacity the businesses our nations have, or our citizen entrepreneurs, and is there an opportunity to utilize them in our subcontracting efforts? How do we get them involved? And that has been a bit of hit and miss for us, but we're trying to improve that process, which makes us really unique as a development corporation, because typically you wouldn't be helping to create competition for your organization. But I told our board, we need to really invite competition, because that just means more of our communities are out there and picking up things that we may have missed, or just continuing that building of wealth in our communities. So what do our nations need to focus on? This is the last slide. So just, acknowledge your value system as an Indigenous organization. Don't shift away from it. I would say stick to your guns when it comes to your value system. And, as soon as you waver or show that weakness that you're willing to waver on your values, people are going to eat you up. And that's not a good way to manage as an organization. So, absolutely stick to your guns when it comes to your value system. Really set a vision. I spend a great deal of time learning about visioning and why we exist as an organization and what we're really trying to do, what we're really trying to build. Make sure that the team that you're building within the organization are focused on that vision and are building a work culture that is reflective of where you're going as an organization. And, make sure to spend a lot of time on business strategy. And like I said, we're an organization that doesn't stop recreating new strategy. It's just part of having a good growth mindset, is that you need to continuously evolve the strategy. If you become complacent and really enjoy what you do, and you just continue to do it year after year without adding anything new or being aware of what's happening in your environment, you'll quickly become irrelevant as an organization. So it's that's that entrepreneur mindset that you need to have, is constantly thinking about solving new problems from the business model that you have. And the last thing here is just develop processes that help navigate who you want as partners and make sure that they are aligned to your value system. And of course, share your brand and your values with the community, because people don't know who you are unless you share who you are as an organization. So those are, I would say, three of the very critical aspects that you need to think about when developing the strategy for your organization. So I know we're right at 4 o'clock, but I'm willing to stay on for questions. So sorry about that, Michelle.
No worries, Thomas. I'm like madly writing all these notes down. I really appreciate your knowledge and your insight. So thank you so much for lending us, first of all, your time, but also what you've learned along the way. Really talking about how to just be open to a different model of how we do business. And some of the pieces that I'm clinging to is it's going back to the community. It's not about me, it's about us and what's best for the community. That's the wealth, really. You also talked about youth, so keeping in mind that yes, we need to invest, we need to put energy into training and teaching our young people as well. And then just back to the land, I think so those are my 3 big takeaways. So thank you so much. So I don't want to talk anymore because I think there might be some questions out there or any comments. Feel free to unmute yourself if you do have a question or comment. We have a little bit of time. We'd love to hear from you. Pam.
Hi, wonderful to see you, Thomas, and thank you. I always learn through you, and you're just super smart. There's lots of ways that we've seen, because I'm in Regina and I hear you and I see you and I'm familiar with what you're setting out to accomplish. How do you report back to your communities, and what do you report back?
Yeah, so when we look at what we're reporting back to the communities on, so we're obviously, how successful have our businesses been. So we're looking at the equity position that we have within organizations and growing our equity. So we have specific metrics on what that growth needs to look like. But then there's other aspects around, okay, well, how from a wealth generation perspective, how many new jobs have we created? How many new positions have we created? Because in our organization, like we don't focus on trying to have 100% Indigenous employment inside of our businesses, that's just not good strategy, because we need that diversity of thought. But what we're saying is make a priority for Indigenous talent to grow and eventually lead those organizations. So we absolutely need, you know, non-Indigenous talent to help us and to give us that capacity to grow those companies. And so we measure those aspects as well. We also talk about the reinvestment that we are making in the community. So even if it's not a dividend distribution, how else are we reinvesting back to the community? And, you know, we have over $125,000 a year. Typically that goes back out into the community to focus on youth programming. And a lot of times what we don't speak about is we actually leverage other relationships to increase the impact of that, you know, 125,000 that we may put out to the community. So that those are some of the things that you know we've been focused on. And from a wealth generation perspective, from an economic development perspective, it's what has the impact been for participation from community members, from nations, and the resources that we're providing. You know, how many people have interacted with the tools that we've created, so we can actually keep track of, you know, have they downloaded some of the tools we've created. So that's helping to measure and see if we're on track for how we're growing the Indigenous business ecosystem that is being built alongside of our you know, corporation. And then from the HR perspective, that, you know, goes a little deeper into, well, how many full-time employment are we creating? How many are we placing in with different organizations? And is that growing? Is the amount of people that we're placing growing? Is the amount of people that we are recruiting into that database that we have, or is that growing? Is it diversifying? Because that means that we're doing, you know, a greater job of representing the Indigenous talent that we have, and that we're keeping greater track so that we can continue with that success. So yeah, there's a lot of those aspects that kind of go into our annual report to communities, and we're actually getting a lot. We just refined even more some of the measurements we'll be looking at as an organization in terms of the types of resources that we're outputting to the communities. So yeah, and we've, you know, got tremendous feedback from our nations of, you know, a lot of the work that we have been able to do, and with, you know, limited resources. So we're a company that started with zero investment dollars, right? Everything has been built on strategy as an organization, and we're, you know, seeing quite a lot of success through strategy. So
Thank you. We'll continue to watch that success.
thanks.
Thanks, Pam. I really appreciate what you said at the beginning, that it's not just about checking those boxes, right? It's about building the capacity. It's about quality over quantity. And I really, really appreciate that, what you had said there, because, you know, so sometimes in the business field, you know, we're eager just to check all of those boxes. And then we miss out and we lose. So I really appreciate that. There was a comment in the chat box. I'm wondering, Georgia, you might need to expand. It says, how do you address Indigenous peoples who aren't? I'm not sure if you want to expand a little bit more on that, Georgia. I'm wondering, I would hate to assume. Okay, there she is.
I think I didn't mean to press enter right away, but basically my question was, how do you address indigenous peoples in community that aren't qualified for administration or corporate roles? Do you honor like internship or mentorship programs within company to build capacity, or do you just wait for indigenous peoples to attain education and so forth and get, the proper degrees and stuff?
Yeah, great question, Georgia. So we actually do two things. So one, absolutely, we are looking for the talent that already has some of those requisites to meet the demands of certain roles. But when we look at the structure that we have for our HR services, what we're trying to do there, and the people that are in that database, like I said, we're focused on how do we grow them vertically in their careers. And so, a high school or a university student may register themselves in our system, and they can go in and change at any time and update the information that they have, and what their goals are. And we try to find where I often tell people our team works like ninjas. So they're quietly in behind the scenes building relationships with companies, and those companies directly source Indigenous talent from us versus going out to the and doing an ad. They specifically come to us because our team has a model and a process that they go through to not only qualify the employer, but to qualify the individual as well, so that there is a better match in them establishing a greater career opportunity. When we look at what we do from a student perspective within our organization, as small as we are, we try to ensure that we always have a good number of students interning with us, either through the summer or throughout the year. So we have students from many different institutions, from university to some of our more technical schools, and they're constantly in the office here. And they'd probably share with you the amount of stress that we put on them sometimes, but it's to help them grow. It's to help them become leaders. And in those opportunities, we get the opportunity to better shift what they need to do to be successful in that career path. And we look for further opportunities for them. So there's just little things like that people don't think about doing that can be so impactful for somebody. And you're changing their world when you're helping to give some of that focus. And as it relates to any of the other relationships in the community, advocacy becomes a big part, and constantly trying to hold our post-secondary institutions to account to having better Indigenous outcomes, and focused on the big community picture, or even our high schools, having discussions with the school boards and whatnot on those particular strategies that they may have, and how we need to look at things a little differently. So we're always being asked for our input on many different strategies, and I know it's a lot of extra work for us, but that's that qualitative work that needs to be done. That, yeah, unfortunately, my board, they can't measure that, but we absolutely know that those little things that we do are going to benefit us long term and benefit our community members.
Thank you. I just want to honor everyone's time. We're going to have this one last question from Leah. She is wondering if your organization has ever worked with nonprofits, specifically urban Indigenous based nonprofits. And if so, can you give us some examples, or maybe one example, just because of time? And if not, how come? Can you explain why not?
So the really interesting thing with our organization, our tribal council, I mean, we're very, very large, and there are many different organizations within the tribal council. So what I typically do, and a lot of them are nonprofits, so I'm not the expert in those parts of the business, but wherever I can help, or whatever the strategy is, that's where we try to participate and support. And so we have urban services, and they have they're able to pick up the phone and say, hey, we need support with this or that. And we're typically able to go all hands in, and it's not just our organization, it's the multiple organizations within our tribal council. So we all pitch in and try to support where we can. We do have, from an employment perspective, we do have employment services that are, they're focused on more of the early stage employment. Just getting your foot in the door, where we're, the next step up in terms of, okay, they have a little bit of experience. Now it's really time to hone in on career. How do we advance those career opportunities now that they got their feet wet in some, different organizations and built some experience? Because our business model around that doesn't succeed unless we have those individuals have some experience behind them. Because then, they're a bit more focused and they're able to say, this is exactly what I'm trying to accomplish in my career. And when they tell us that, that makes it so much easier, because we can't base strategy or support someone if they don't know what they want as well, right? We have to challenge their thinking. But yeah, so we do partner with a lot of different nonprofits, and even in the city here, like we have all sorts of agreements with nonprofit, non-Indigenous organizations that have services and have funding that we don't, and they're the experts. And so we heavily rely on their services.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks so much for that question, Leah. Well, Thomas, it's been a rich, hour and 15 minutes with you. Again, thank you so much for your insight, your knowledge that you've shared with us. So much luck and so much, may your path continue. May you continue to grow and inspire and teach and lead others. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. And for all of you who have joined, thank you for being here. I have actually so many takeaways, but one of the other pieces was just to honor what you value and just be very clear on that. And, I can't help but to think of those 7 sacred teachings and the teachings of the ancestors who've walked before us, and we hold that. And it's all about the community. It's all about, supporting and looking after, our elders, our youth, our community, our circle. May we all benefit. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you have a good rest of the day wherever you are. I hope that you are safe, that you are healthy, that you feel at ease and at peace, and may your feet just take you to good places, and that you would honor yourself, your spirit, the land, the waters, the animals, the earth that's all around you, and that you would honor your spirit. So thank you so much for joining us. Be well, everyone. Thank you so much. Peace.
All right. Thanks, everyone.